You know, politics is a funny thing when it comes to impeachment. 20 years ago, the major players in the Clinton impeachment trial were at odds at, well, calling witnesses in the Senate. Take a look. 20 years ago.
It seems to me that no good case has been made for witnesses.
In every trial that there has ever been in the Senate regarding impeachment, witnesses were called.
So, of course, that had us thinking, it happens sometimes, they must feel the exact same way today, right? Take a look.
We can force votes. Leader McConnell will never be for witnesses and documents. He has said he's taking his cue from the White House, and the White House wants a cover-up.
Clearly, to me, any president would ask for executive privilege regarding these witnesses. And if they were that important, why didn't you call them in the House?
This is begging for an Abbott and Costello moment, right? I mean, but you said 20 years ago you wanted to do a little different, but is this all just partisan politics? Axios political reporter Caitlin Owens, Democratic strategist David Morey, GOP strategist Justin Sayfie. Caitlin, I know politics, how it works. I get that. I'm not meaning to disparage either of those gentlemen, but when the roles are flipped, so are the points of view. That just heightens the sentiment that this is all politics.
Right, you know, of course it does, and this is Washington. This is not the first time that we've, had side-by-side clips of politicians appearing to talk out of both sides of their mouth, depending on whether, whether that's politically expedient or not. That said, of course, there's also a point of view that this is just different than 20 years ago, right? And, we're fighting about process at this point. It's kind of an age-old Washington tactic to, instead of fighting about the merits, you're fighting about process, which, if 20 years ago you were on the other side, it doesn't look good.
No, it does not. I don't mean to jump on you there, Caitlin, but I just want to switch to Washington right now. This is outside the Martin Luther King Memorial in Washington, D.C. The president and the vice president of the United States quietly paying their respects to the former civil rights leader. We just learned that he wanted to stop by there. If you think about it, Justin Sayfie, the backdrop that the president has been using is to continue with his business. In this case, all the other things that are going on, he'll be leaving for Davos, Switzerland. He has been mentioning, speaking of Martin Luther King, the great progress made for minorities and all Americans in the labor market, and that is the backdrop for a lot of this, less so impeachment. How is that, you think, working out?
I think it's the right strategy for the president. It's a two-pronged strategy. On one hand, he has his stellar legal team defending impeachment in the Senate, but at the same time, he wants to show the American people that he's not being distracted by impeachment, that he's going to continue to lead. He's going to go to Davos, Switzerland, meet with world leaders there, talk about the incredible U.S. economy and how it's doing. I think it's exactly the thing that he should be doing, and I think that Bill Clinton even tried to do 20 years ago.
David, looking at this and knowing how people had reversed sort of points of view because the shoe was on the other foot, to Caitlin's earlier point, Chuck Schumer felt no need for witnesses back then, now thinks we should. Lindsey Graham, big need for witnesses back then, no need now. Doesn't this play into that theme that few minds are going to be changed in this partisan divide?
Yeah, it probably does, Neil. I don't think we're going to have a lot of minds change. Unless somebody pulls at a thread, we do have witnesses, which we probably will end up having some witnesses. And the more you pull on the threads here, the more you find. Look, we got some vertigo on the president's legal team with Dershowitz and Starr. And in '99, in the impeachment scandal of Clinton, there was a big Ken Starr investigation. There wasn't quite that in the House, and they had a lot of trouble, as you know, getting witnesses through the House process because they would have to fight in legal battles that would take forever in the court system. So it's a different can of worms here. I suspect we're not going to change a lot of minds, though. We're going to be watching a lot of TV, though.
Yeah, I guess we will. Caitlin, I'm just wondering, in that environment here, whether length will matter. In other words, how long this drags on will matter. It's Republicans, the argument goes, the shorter, the better. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, but what are you hearing?
Right. I think that it depends matter for what, right? I think that, again, if more witnesses or if witnesses are allowed to testify, we could learn more, right? And that could be damaging to the president. Or, there's a world, too, where it could be exonerating. But everything we've learned so far, I think so far we've seen that the more people talk, the worse it gets for the president, right? But in terms of mattering ultimately for how senators vote, I don't know that it matters. I think a lot of minds are made up already. Yeah. And the Senate has the votes to acquit him. And then in terms of the 2020 election, that's a long time from now.
It is indeed. No, it is. David, I just said, Charles Payne on here thinks that the polls aren't reflecting support, particularly among minorities, for the president. They just can't and won't admit it. What did you make of that?
I think there's some truth in it, but if you look at, you'd have to add a lot of numbers to the polls. As you know, the African-American vote is so low for Trump in the polling. I think what the polls are not really telling us, and maybe the pundits as well, Neil, is the turnout energy that the Democrats may have. Short of a third-party run, short of a war which distracts the country, the Democrats have this tremendous energy to beat Trump. Hard to unite the Democrats. They are very united around that concept.
Yeah, it depends on who their nominee is, to your point. Justin, the Republicans are very united, too. They think the president has been shammed on this whole impeachment thing. So both parties are very galvanized, aren't they?
Well, they are, and for President Trump, he's going to use this whole impeachment thing to pound his narrative that he's in Washington challenging the swamp, that he calls it, and the swamp is trying to send him home and kick him out. So really, the interesting thing about impeachment is it plays exactly into his narrative that he's representing the people in Washington don't like that. And that's going to galvanize Republicans, and I think it's also going to help him with some disaffected voters that he won in some of those Midwestern swing states as well.
We shall see. Still early, to Caitlin's point. Don't know. All right, in the meantime, guys.